In a world where a nobleman's sins were whispered like folklore and a woman's defiance could hang her, Elias Ashcombe had lived untouched by consequence. The second son of Baron Aldrich Ashcombe, he had been raised on privilege and expectation, but not accountability. In the manor halls of Eastmere, his indulgences were not shamed, but quietly applauded. A different girl in every market town, a scandal hushed with coin or charm. And if a stable boy took the blame, or a washerwoman lost her place, what of it? Boys would be boys. And noblemen? They were allowed to be gods. He was beautiful too. That kind of careless, smirking beauty that made forgiveness come too easily. Golden brown hair, eyes that seemed always amused. He was 29 and had never been told no in a way that stuck. Not by his parents, not by the church, not by any woman whose name he bothered to remember. But 8 months ago, one girl had said no. A peasant girl in a pale cloak at the village market. She hadn't bowed, hadn't curtsied, hadn't blushed. She had met his gaze like an equal. No, like someone who saw straight through him and walked away. And now, on a cold spring afternoon, as Elias rode along the outer woods of his uncle's estate, the sky a low sheet of pewter above the treetops, he saw her again. She was crossing the old barn path. Her hood was down. The wind caught strands of her hair, wheat blonde, unbrushed. She held a basket half covered with linen, a girl like any other. And yet, he pulled the reins without thinking. The horse slowed, then stilled. She didn't look up. "You," he said. She turned at the voice, her eyes calm, assessing. "My lord," she said. Nothing more. He swung down from his saddle, boots landing soft in the dirt. His smile came like instinct. "You remember me. I remember you tried to buy a pear by asking if it was as sweet as the merchant's daughter," she said, unblinking. "And that the merchant's daughter blushed before realizing you weren't speaking to her." He laughed aloud, genuinely delighted. "So you do remember." "I remember fools," she said. "They make the world louder." He circled a step closer, eyes flicking over her. "Tell me your name this time, or must I guess again?" She didn't answer, just turned, as if to continue walking. "Wait," he said. "What do peasants say of love? Does such a thing exist in your world?" She paused. When she turned back, her eyes had changed. Something colder, clearer. "Love?" she said quietly. "It is the only hunger that feeds itself by longing. The only pain we pray returns. And if it's real, it kneels for no one." The words struck him, not gently. He took a step forward, then another. She backed away, one foot retreating in the damp earth, but not fast enough. In a moment, he was there, seizing her by the arm. She gasped, "Let go!" And then his mouth was on hers. It was not gentle. It was not kind. It was the kiss of a man who had never been denied. Her hands pushed at him, but he held for one stunned, heated moment. Longer, then pulled back, just enough to look at her. "Strawberries," he murmured. "Unexpected." She slapped him, not hard, but firm. "Enough. You forget yourself, my lord." "No," he said. "I remember myself all too well." She straightened her shoulders, chin lifted. "I could hang for less." He shrugged. "No one would believe you." She stared at him, shocked, then something else. Disgust, yes, but deeper still, the bitter understanding of how the world worked. "I've heard of you," she said. "The one who laughs at sermons and sleeps through confession. The one who breaks girls and calls it a joke. You don't believe in anything but your own appetite." He smiled. "And yet here we are." She turned sharply. "You are everything that's wrong with men like you. And you," he said softly, "are everything that doesn't fit where it should." He mounted again, gripping the reins. "No one would believe you," he repeated. "Truth isn't truth from a peasant's mouth. That's the world we live in." And with that, he spurred his horse and rode off. Fast, careless, not looking back. But that night, in the golden silence of his borrowed chamber, Elias Ashcombe did not sleep. He lay still, staring at the beams above him as candlelight guttered low. Her words played back in his mind. one by one. Not her warning, not her slap. If it's real, it kneels for no one. He sat up in the dark, elbows on his knees, fingers laced behind his neck. Her voice, her defiance, the way she had tasted of wildness and anger, and something not yet broken. No one would believe her. And yet, she had believed in something. He closed his eyes. Bold, he whispered, bolder than me. And for the first time in his life, the thought of a girl not falling for him made him feel small. 2 weeks passed, not in silence, but in whispers. It began with the baker's daughter, who had seen Elias Ashcombe walking near the old barn at twilight, twice in the same week. Once with no horse, once with something like purpose in his eyes. Willa heard it from her aunt first. "You'll keep your head down," the woman muttered one morning over the hearth. "There's talk, and talk in a village like this turns to fire before it turns to truth." Willa said nothing, but she stopped going to market, stopped lingering in the fields. The world had grown too sharp. And yet, when a knock came one afternoon at the back of the cottage, and she opened the door to find Elias standing there, hat in hand, hair tousled by the wind, she didn't close it. He looked different, tired maybe, less polished, like a man who had forgotten what once made him confident. "I shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Then why are you?" she asked. He hesitated, then met her eyes. "Because I regret the first kiss I stole from you, and I think I'm afraid of what that says about me." She blinked, not expecting honesty. He ran a hand through his hair. "I've never apologized, not for something like that." She folded her arms, wary. "You don't have to make a show of remorse. I survived it. That's not the point. What is? That it meant something to you, and I treated it like it meant nothing." He looked down, "And I hated myself for that. That's the point." Something in her expression softened, just slightly. After a pause, she said, "So what now? You apologize and vanish again?" He met her gaze. "Number, I want to talk. Just talk. There's a place near the old well, quiet, away from mouths. Tomorrow night, say yes." She said nothing, but the next night, she came. The clearing was quiet, the grass still slick with spring dew, the moon caught like a coin in the branches above. He was already there, sitting on a low stone, elbows on his knees, waiting. When she stepped into the moonlight, he stood. No words at first, just silence, the kind people carry when they don't want to say the wrong thing. And then, slowly, they spoke, of things that didn't belong to other people. Not gossip, not titles. He told her about his brother, dead in a skirmish across the channel, and how the house had never felt quiet since. She told him about her mother, gone after childbirth, and how she still woke with the phantom sound of her voice some mornings. They talked about things neither of them meant to say, and as the night deepened, the distance between them shrank. There was a moment, after a laugh, after a quiet breath, where their faces drew close. The air between them changed. He leaned in but stopped. So did she. They stood like that, the space between them trembling, but no kiss came. Instead, Elias reached out, slowly, and pulled her into a hug, not one of possession, one of something softer, a kind of preservation. Her arms, after a beat, went around him too. They held each other in the dark like two people who didn't know how to be soft with anyone, but had just found someone they could be soft with. When he pulled back, he looked at her for a long moment. "I've never been this close to a woman," he said, "and not tried to have her." She looked up, steady. "Then maybe it's time you learn." He smiled faintly, and when they parted, no kiss, no vow, he found himself looking back more than once. Later that night, as he lay in his chamber, Elias stared at the ceiling in silence, not from guilt, from awe. "What's becoming of me?" he thought. "I hugged her. I apologized. I didn't touch her again. I let her go. And strangest of all, he didn't want to undo it." Willa walked home alone. The wind tugged gently at her cloak, and the grass along the path swayed like it too, held secrets. She said nothing aloud, but inside, something churned. He had hugged her, and she had let him. Worse still, she had wanted more. Not a promise, not a hand in marriage, just a kiss, a real one, the kind she'd heard about, read about in old books passed between girls, the kind with flushed cheeks and stolen breaths and no one else watching. She'd never been kissed before, not properly, and for one foolish, breathless moment she had nearly leaned in. Now, walking beneath the stars, she could still feel the shape of his arms around her. "Maybe next time," she whispered, hardly aware she'd said it aloud. "Just to know." Then she caught herself, stopped, walking. She couldn't afford to think like that. Not her. Not here. She wasn't a lady of court with silk gloves and lenient fathers. She was a peasant girl who scrubbed pots and hauled pails and had no dowry worth more than a goose. He wasn't for her, and she wasn't for him. But even so, what would it be like? She walked the rest of the way home with her lips pressed tightly together, not to keep warm, but to keep from wishing. It had been nearly a month since their first quiet meeting at the well, and since then, Elias had snuck out nearly every night, never telling anyone, not his uncle, not the staff, and certainly not the woman in violet who had begun asking questions in clipped tones behind closed doors. But he didn't care. He rode through the woods without escort, tethered his horse far from the path, and walked in silence to the old barn, the well, the abandoned grove near the stream, anywhere she might appear. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they just stood, arms around each other, not needing words, and he never tried to kiss her again, not once. He would hold her, breathe her in, and when she brought him strawberries, always strawberries, he'd laugh softly and say, "You remembered," and she'd smile like it was the only time she could. What she didn't know was that sometimes he followed her, not out of distrust, but protection. He'd leave his horse behind and walk quietly, shadowing her as she cut through the woods or crossed the ridge alone, never seen, but always near when the sun dipped too fast or the path turned too dark. One night, he didn't mean to be seen, but he had to act. 3 men, drunk, cloaked, foul with slurred threats, came out of the trees near the south trail, and she screamed once. Elias didn't think. He fought with rage he didn't know he had. Fists, elbows, fury, and the men scattered when they saw his face. For the Ashcombe name carried weight even among animals. When it was over, he stood panting, blood at the corner of his mouth, and she was trembling behind a tree. "You were following me?" she whispered, and he nodded. "I was passing by," he said weakly. No, I wasn't. I follow you every time. Because if anything happened to you..." But the words clogged in his throat. She stepped closer, hands shaking. "You didn't try to kiss me," she said. He blinked. "What? All these nights? You never tried. I didn't want to hurt you." "You wouldn't." He swallowed hard. "You don't understand. Willa, I've wanted you, from the moment you first defied me in the market. But I couldn't touch you. Not like that. Because what if I had to leave you? What if I took something sacred from you, then couldn't protect it? How would you look at me then?" She looked at him now, eyes wide, soft. "And if I kissed you," he went on, voice cracking, "I'd want more. I'd want everything. I want to marry you. I want to burn every tradition that says I can't. But we both know they'll never let it happen. Not unless we run. Not unless we give up everything." She reached out, touched his jaw where blood still clung. "You didn't take anything from me," she whispered. "You gave me something." He closed his eyes, and then, finally, she leaned in, and he didn't stop her. Their lips met, slow at first, searching. It wasn't hunger. It was recognition, a soft ache blooming into something too big for either of them. They didn't speak as he took her hand and led her to the barn. Inside, the air smelled of hay and old wood, moonlight spilling through a broken slat, and he laid his cloak on the ground. No one undressed in haste. No part of it felt like a secret. When he touched her, it was reverent, as if memorizing her skin, and when she touched him, it was with quiet trust, as if saying, "I see who you are now." They moved slowly, like 2 people afraid to wake from something real, and when it was over, They lay tangled in silence. She reached into her satchel beside her and pulled out a few small strawberries, placing one at his lips. He laughed gently. "You really do love these." "I always have," she whispered, "since I was a child." He held her close, and this time he kissed her, not like a man who had conquered something, but like one who had finally come home. Outside, the wind passed through the trees like a breath, and inside the old barn, two hearts made a vow the world would never hear. But the stars did, and they did not forget. The rains had returned to the village, washing over rooftops and footpaths with a persistence that felt more like warning than weather. The sky stayed gray, as though mourning something it could not name, and beneath that sky, tucked in the dim back room of a peasant's cottage, Willa Rain sat with her hands folded over the growing curve of her belly. She hadn't told Elias. How could she? He hadn't come. It had been nearly 3 weeks since she last saw him. 3 weeks of silence, of aching, of mornings spent staring at the hills where his horse used to appear. Her aunt had begun watching her more closely, saying little, but seeing everything. And in the village, the whispers had begun to grow roots. "Did you hear? Look how she walks. Slow, tired. She never goes to market now." Not everyone knew the father's name. Some guessed. A few knew. But only her aunt had the nerve to speak it aloud behind closed doors. "Elias Ashcombe?" she had asked one morning, voice tight as a bowstring. "The nobleman's boy?" Willa hadn't answered. She didn't need to. That day, Elias had ridden from Eastmere. The sky had been clear, the wind sharp. He had seen no one, spoken to no one, only galloped through the trees like a man outrunning something unspoken. But when he returned that evening, his father was waiting. The Baron and the Baroness sat in the parlour with Lady Rosamond, the room too quiet, the hearth too still. Elias entered still dusty from the road. His father did not look up. "You will tell me this is all nonsense." Elias stopped, eyes narrowing. "A girl," the Baroness said, "in the village. Rumors say you've been seen near the old barn. With her. More than once." Lady Rosamond adjusted a bracelet she hadn't earned. "They say she's fair, blushing, not the sort to be alone with a man." Elias looked from face to face. He had not planned to lie. Not truly. But something in their tone, their hunger to uncover scandal, made the words tighten in his throat. His father's eyes locked with his. "Do you know her?" He paused. Just a moment. Then, "No." The Baron narrowed his eyes. "Speak clearly. Is she yours?" I said no. Lady Rosamond tilted her head, amused. "They say you've been sneaking off after supper. I rather hoped it was for something romantic." Elias gave a short laugh, but it sounded like a knife scraping glass. "You think I'd ruin myself over some peasant girl? I don't sleep with rats." The room chilled. His mother blinked slowly. The Baron folded his hands. Rosamond arched a brow. "Is that what this is about?" Elias continued. "You think I've fallen for some skirt who smells of sheep and wet earth? Gods! You think I'd chain this family over that?" His voice was harder now, cutting, more than denial, erasure. "I don't even know her name. And if I did, I still wouldn't admit to touching her. Not when the stench of her would cling for days." The Baron gave a satisfied nod, though even he looked vaguely uneasy. The Baroness said nothing. Lips pursed. Rosamond laughed once, low and cruel. Elias turned and walked out before they could see the color drain from his face. He did not sleep that night. He sat alone in the dark of his chamber, fire low, the window open to let in the cold. And for the second time in his life, Elias Ashcombe cried, not tears of guilt, not even shame, but a grief so sharp, so physical, that it struck through his ribs like a hammer. His chest burned, his jaw locked, his throat constricted until it felt like he might die just holding it all in. When the sobs came, they were raw, ragged. He hunched forward like a man being crushed from within. It hurt, truly, bodily hurt, the kind of pain that made him clutch at his chest and gasp, and only when the tears finally broke, wet, hot, blinding, did the pain ease, like a boil lanced, like breath returning to a man who'd been drowning. He wept because he had denied her, because he had to, because he still loved her. The servants were told he was sick. He took a fever, the steward said. Best not disturb him. But the maids saw. They always did. The food trays came back untouched. The sheets remained unwashed. His boots unmoved. Lady Rosamond came to call 3 times. Each time, she was told he was sleeping, and each time, the lie tasted sourer. Willa did not know what had happened, only that he had stopped coming. Every evening for weeks she had prepared, combed her hair, walked to the old barn where they used to meet, always at the same hour, near sunset, when the wind would still and the sky would blush, but he never came. One day, the rains returned. Her aunt told her not to go, but she went. She stood beneath the overhang, arms wrapped around herself, cloak soaked through within minutes. She waited, first 1 hour, then 2, then 4. He didn't come. When she returned, her lips were blue, her fingers shaking. Her aunt stood in the doorway with arms crossed. You waited for him. Willa said nothing. In the rain, no less. And you carrying his child. She looked up, startled. Her aunt didn't blink. Yes, child. I know. I'm not blind, just tired. Tired of watching good girls lose themselves for men who think their name is worth more than a promise. Still, Willa said nothing. Her eyes were glassy, too tired to defend herself. Her aunt stepped closer, voice rising. You love that man more than your own life, Willa. And now you're with child. No ring, no word, no future. You gave him everything. And what did he give you? Nothing but silence. You should have looked among your own. There are plenty of good-hearted boys in this village who'd have thanked God for a fair girl like you. Willa's lip trembled. Why him? Her aunt whispered now. Why bring a man like that into your life to torment your soul? Willa didn't answer. She didn't know how. Her aunt softened. She stepped forward, cradled her cheek. But what's done is done, and I'll not let them take you, you hear? If the church comes knocking, I'll strip naked and pretend to be a witch. Willa blinked. Don't laugh. I'll curse every chicken in this village with a lazy egg if I have to. My goodness, child. Sometimes in times like these, we laugh. Otherwise, we drown. And Willa laughed. Just once. A broken hoarse sound. Her aunt kissed her brow. You're not alone. Not while I have breath in me. That night, Willa didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the rain claw at the roof. Outside, the church bell tolled once. Not for her. Not yet. But it would. She knew it. And when it did, she would stand. Not because she was strong, but because she had no choice. She turned on her side, curled her arms around the life growing inside her, and whispered the name of the man who had once held her like she was something worth saving. And miles away, in the dark of a manor too grand to hold warmth, that same man sat at a window, watching the rain, wondering if she still remembered the sound of his voice. He did not know. He would not know, for weeks still, that he had left behind more than a heart. He had left behind a child. It began with a giggle, light and airy, carried on the stone corridors of Eastmere like a secret begging to be heard. Elias had risen early that day, or rather, had not slept at all, and while wandering through the lesser hall, he heard them. 2 young maids, heads bowed, whispering in shrill delight. Did you hear? They say she's with child, a farmer's niece, the one who used to bring potatoes. Shh, you don't know that for certain. But everyone's talking, that the father could be... They gasped when they saw him. My lord, we didn't hear you come in. Elias stood motionless, unreadable. What were you speaking of? He asked. They hesitated. About a girl, a peasant girl. What girl? Neither answered. He stepped forward, and the bolder maid turned to flee, gasping as he reached for her arm. She darted away down the corridor, skirts flying. He turned sharply and blocked the second, cornering her where the stone narrowed. Speak. Trembling, she whispered. The one from the market. Blonde hair, quiet. Some call her Willa. What else did you hear?
Please, my lord, I never meant trouble. I told no one. Only her.
Say it. She swallowed hard.
They say you are the father, sir.
His face went white, then red, then white again. The corridor tilted, his hands clenched. He bolted for his chamber. Servants stepped back in alarm. He slammed the door, and this time the agony was not quiet. A roar broke from his throat, a cry so raw it echoed down the stone halls. Then came the crash of splintering wood. Servants whispered. The steward stared up at the ceiling. "The master's gone mad," they said. Inside, Elias wept, openly, loudly, his breath ragged, body racked. It was too much. When the cries left him breathless, he stumbled out, mounted his horse, and galloped toward the village. He saw her then, alone near the lane, her cloak wrapped tight, her belly unmistakable. It was her, and she was carrying him. He dismounted and strode to her, heads turned. The blacksmith, the baker's wife, the old woman by the well, everyone stared. "What are you staring at?" he barked. "Did you see a ghost?" They turned away. Willa saw him and quickened her steps. "Willa, wait!" But she didn't. She walked faster, not from fear, but pain. He reached for her. She flinched. "Don't. Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" she said. "That I imagined it? That I'm only a girl with too many dreams and too little sense?" He stood stunned. The street emptied. The wind shifted. And she walked away, alone. Willa walked home from the village in silence, her belly concealed beneath layers of coarse cloth, though not well enough to escape suspicion, and behind her eyes the pain of seeing Elias, then watching him do nothing, throbbed like an old wound split open. She entered the cottage with hands trembling, only to find her aunt already back from market, face drawn with panic, whispering that the priest's housekeeper had spoken of summoning Willa for public penance, and without hesitation they set off, determined to face him before the town could brand her like a criminal. The chapel loomed cold and lifeless, and Father Reynold appeared like a shadow in cassock and candlelight, his voice flat as he accused her of fornication and demanded repentance, not by name, but by silence and submission, suggesting the convent at Mayhurst, a life without child or love or identity. But Willa stood firm, declaring that she would not forget the man she loved, nor deny the child they had created. Her refusal cracked the air like thunder, and when she said calmly, "Then you will hang me," even the priest turned away in silence, defeated not by her defiance but by its dignity. They left the chapel in silence, and the next morning the priest's orders were posted at the doors, the gallows to be raised by first light. Still, Willa did not cry, not when the ropes were prepared, not when her aunt wept by the fire, whispering that she should have locked the door the day Elias first looked at her. She sat with one hand over her belly and the other tracing the memory of his voice, and in the stone halls of Eastmere, the servants began to whisper louder, because judgment had been set in motion, and it was coming. The day began with stillness, not peace, just an eerie hush that clung to the air like fog before a storm. The stone corridors of Eastmere were too quiet. The servants moved slower, spoke softer. Elias noticed it, though no one told him why. He had been pacing his chamber since sunrise, caught in the echo of his thoughts. He had a plan, or so he thought. He would speak to his parents. He would beg them to see reason. Willa was not just some nameless village girl. She carried his child, their grandchild. Perhaps with the right words, he could convince them to lift her status. Perhaps she could be made a lady. There were ways, quiet titles, gifts from the crown. He knew it would cause scandal, but scandal could fade. A life lost would not. He still believed he had time. Then came the voices. 2 male servants outside the west stairs, speaking in low tones as they polished the brass handles. They say she was a virgin, one said, never been touched before him. Aye, replied the other, and now she'll swing for it, poor thing. Elias stopped breathing. His heartbeat roared in his ears. The priests ordered the gallows built by first light, one added. They'll make a spectacle of it. Can't have bastards born from sin. The cloth fell from Elias's hand. He didn't ask. He didn't wait. He stormed through the halls like a man possessed. Maids shrank against walls. Footmen turned their eyes. He reached his parents' chambers and burst through the doors without knocking. Mother, he growled, breathless. You are part of this? You would sit here and let them butcher your grandchild. The Baroness turned from the window, pale. Elias, don't lie to me, he said, voice cracking. You knew, you all knew, and you said nothing. His father rose. Lower your voice. You forget yourself. No, Elias spat. I remember exactly who I am. I am the man who ruined a girl because you taught me I could. And now you'd let her die to protect your bloody name. Silence fell. His mother's lip trembled. For the first time in his life, Elias saw her truly shaken. They'll hang her in the square, he said, voice low now. She's with child, with our blood, and you will not stop it? She looked away. I loved her, he whispered. I still do. I would give everything for her. If you let them do this, I will never forgive you. Not in this life, not the next. His father opened his mouth, but Elias was already gone. Out the chamber, down the stairs, through the stables. The gallows were already being hammered into place. He would not let it stand. Back in the chamber, the Baroness stood frozen, one hand clutched to her chest. She turned slowly to her husband, her voice thin and stunned. She is with child. His child. The Baron stiffened. Surely that cannot be. You saw his eyes, she said. His voice. He has never loved anyone. Never. We've matched him with daughters of lords, ladies of court, and he has never once fought for a soul. Until now. The Baron's jaw tightened. It changes nothing. It changes everything, she snapped. Do you not see it? This is our blood. This is our only grandchild, our only chance for one. Aldrich is gone. There is no other heir. If we lose Elias... She moved fast, sharper than she had in years. Send word to the magistrate now. Tell the priest to stay his hand. No one moves until we arrive. You would what? Travel to the gallows? Her husband asked. I would tear it down myself if it keeps our son alive, she said. And if saving that girl is the only way to save him, then by God, I'll rewrite the laws myself. She turned to the maid standing in the doorway. Saddle the carriage. Now and send a rider ahead. Tell them. Hold. Everything. Until the Baroness of Eastmere arrives. The wheels of change had begun to turn. The chapel square was heavy and grey, with a dampness in the air that clung to the skin and made the bones ache. The kind of day that felt like a warning, as villagers gathered slowly, uneasily, near the unfinished gallows that stood beneath the bare limbs of a winter tree, its frames slick from night rain. And though Willa had not yet been brought forth, the boards creaked beneath the carpenter's hands, and the rope hung ready, coiled like a viper waiting for breath. Elias had not stopped moving since he stormed from his parents' chamber, heart pounding like war drums, the road a blur beneath his horse's hooves as he reached the square in time, dismounted in mud-streaked boots and tangled cloak, scanning the crowd until he saw her. Willa, pale and bruised beneath the gallows, her white linen shift glowing in the mist, as her aunt screamed behind guards and the priest thundered judgments that Elias never heard. He pushed past them all and dropped to his knees, voice raw as he cried, "Take me instead," confessing before the world that he was the father, that she carried his child, that he would not let her hang while he still drew breath, defying the priest's call for justice with trembling defiance. "If that makes me damned, then let me burn for love." Gasps filled the square, and from the carriage arrived the Baroness, pale, shaken, but unyielding, as she declared, "There will be no hanging. She carries the blood of Eastmere." And after a breathless pause, the Baron nodded, raising his hand. And with that, the executioner stepped back. The gallows remained unfinished, and Willa wept, not from fear, but from the impossible weight of being saved. The gallows were dismantled by nightfall, plank by plank, as villagers watched in solemn silence, and word spread faster than the hammer could fall. By sundown, even distant farms and noble manors knew that Elias Ashcombe, son of the Baron, had knelt in the mud and begged for the life of a peasant girl carrying his child. Willa was escorted home, not in chains, but not yet free, her aunt gripping her hand the entire way, while Eastmere Manor fell into reverent hush, servants moving as if the walls themselves could shatter from noise, and Elias, pacing endlessly, bore the weight of a truth finally spoken aloud to priest, parent, and crowd. He had no care for inheritance, only for her. That night, his mother came to him without title or escort, and when she asked if he loved Willa, he said yes without hesitation, and she told him to go, to assure the girl who had stood alone in front of death that it was over. So he walked, not rode, to Willa's cottage beneath the gray sky, and when she opened the door, pale and shaken, he entered not like a nobleman, but a man in awe of forgiveness. He thanked her aunt in a whisper, knelt to no throne but the hearth, and told Willa simply, "I don't know what happens next, only that I don't want to face any of it without you." When he placed his hand gently on her belly and called the child ours, she leaned into him, and in that moment, fear fell away, and only a fragile, daring hope remained between them, the beginning of something new. As Elias was about to leave Willa's cottage, the sound of carriage wheels stopped him in his tracks. Parked just off the path stood an Ashcombe carriage, the family crest faintly glinting on the lacquered door. The figure who stepped down was not his father, but his mother. She approached with quiet grace, her posture softened by emotion, her cloak wrapped tightly against the wind. Elias turned, startled, and said nothing as she met his gaze, then passed him with a glance full of unspoken resolve. She reached Willa's cottage and knocked once. The aunt answered the door first, eyes narrowed, protective, but the Baroness bowed her head slightly and spoke with quiet dignity. "I've come to see the girl who changed my son," she said, "and to meet the woman brave enough to face death without bending." Willa stepped into view, pale and wary. The Baroness looked at her with something like awe. "My child," she said softly, "I have known many noble women in my life. None would have stood as you did." She reached for Willa's hand, did not take it, only offered. Willa gave a cautious nod. Then the Baroness turned to the aunt. "There is one more step, not at Eastmere, at court." The journey to court was long, the kind of journey made only once in a lifetime. Willa wore her aunt's best cloak. Elias wore his house colors, reluctantly. He had never felt more like a stranger in his own garments. The palace was cold stone and gold trim, all gleam and spectacle. Every step echoed, every corridor whispered. They were brought before a panel of nobles, lords, ladies, men and women who looked at Willa like something they'd scraped from the heel of a boot. But Elias stood tall. "I come not to beg," he said, "but to inform. This is the woman I love, and this is the child she carries. My child." Gasps, murmurs. A judge raised a brow. "You ask us to legitimize a union between a nobleman and a peasant?" Elias nodded. "Number I ask you to witness the moment a man stops being a coward." The court went still. Then, unexpectedly, the Queen's voice rang out, gentle, clear. "Let them be married," she said. Let us see for once if love can redeem more than it destroys." And with that, the chamber broke into confusion, but the record was signed. The wedding was to be held in the chapel at Eastmere. Not a grand affair, no parades, just love, made legal. The court had ruled, but Elias had not yet said the words that mattered. He waited until Willa had returned to the new cottage, modest, quiet, and nestled at the edge of Ashcombe Land. It wasn't much, but it was warm, dry, and far from wagging tongues. Elias had arranged it himself, privately, ensuring Willa and her aunt had safety without spectacle. A place not for hiding, but for healing. 3 days passed. Willa expected nothing. Her belly had begun to show more. She walked with care. Her aunt was mending clothes when Elias came. He did not knock this time. He stood outside the open door, cloak in hand, heart thundering against his ribs. Willa turned at the sound of his breath. "You look pale," she said. "I'm terrified," he admitted. She blinked. He stepped inside. Her aunt rose, sensing something, and quietly took her sewing basket to the far room. Elias turned too. Willa, hands trembling. "I thought speaking before nobles would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. But this is worse, because you matter more than the crown." She watched him, lips parted. "I don't know how to do this properly," he said, fumbling in the inside pocket of his coat. "Every time I rehearsed it, I sounded like a fool." She crossed her arms, but gently. "You're doing fine." He held out the ring. It wasn't new. It was older than either of them. A sapphire set in delicate gold, once belonging to a woman who'd married for love and lived for it too. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "Not the one who arranged parties. The one who once defied a duke to marry my grandfather." Willa's eyes brimmed. He fell to one knee, but it wasn't practiced. His voice cracked. "I don't want to repair what I broke. I want to build something better. With you. Not as a nobleman making amends, just as Elias, just as a man who cannot imagine his life without the sound of your voice." She couldn't speak. "Will you marry me? Not because of law, not because of the child, but because—" "Yes," she said suddenly. "Before you finish, yes." He laughed, relieved and wrecked all at once. He stood and placed the ring on her finger, and she kissed his cheek, then his lips. The wedding took place a fortnight later, in the Eastmere Chapel. It was not grand, no fanfare, just 100 candles, the hush of reverent watchers, and the simple vows of two people who had lost and found themselves in each other. When Elias said, "I do," he meant every word. And when Willa whispered, "I will," the wind outside paused, as if to carry the sound somewhere holy.
I spoke his name beneath the sky, and now the ground won't let me lie. The wind has turned, a well runs dry, but still I hold the child